Okay, just give it 5 seconds or so, and we should be live. I'll just share it across my channels first, and then we'll get started. Otherwise, I'll forget to do that. All right, we are live. So, one moment. I'll get to the rest of them later. There's so many groups to share it. فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone. This is your brother Abdullah from Pillars of Guidance Community Center. We're going live from Melbourne, and we have our two special guests for this program, both from Sydney, mashallah. So this particular episode is a continuation of a series that we're running at the moment. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to gauge the impact that the current lockdown or the coronavirus situation has had on our community and our society in general. So we've already covered the medical side of things with our special guest doctors. We covered the charity response that's been undertaken. And of course, this episode is on the impact of mental health and keeping on top of our mental health during this particular time. Now, there will be a couple of more episodes, inshallah, where we'll explore other dimensions. So stay tuned, and I think that will run through into Ramadan. So a lot of things to discuss. But before we go into that, or we'll leave that for another time, I wanted to unpack and unravel how we got here, particularly this conversation and its importance and why we need to have this ongoing discussion, not only just to build awareness, but to understand how to respond appropriately. And so with the lockdown that's ensued here in Melbourne or across the world, in fact, it has a total change to the social structure of our society or the way that we go about our daily lives. And I know for myself, it's been a little bit of a shock. I've been pretty much stuck at home, not going anywhere, and you almost have a sense of loss, and a little bit confused at times as well, given that your daily routine, your daily activities have are no longer there anymore, and people are losing their jobs, incomes are being affected, our personal relationships, our work relationships, and even just having time to ourselves, despite the isolation. I live in a family house, got my wife, kids, and my brothers and sisters, and we're all at home now. I feel like I'm back in primary school, and of course, many of our children are being either more or less homeschooled or schooled online, and that access to our social structures of our community, our places of worship have been closed. No sporting activities, entertainment, and that total loss of physical connectedness within our family and the community at large. And so this can put pressure on many aspects of our lives that I've already sort of touched on, and can also put a bit of the future in question for us. So that sense of security that may have been is probably under threat at the moment. And that loss of connectedness can really shape our psyche and impact our mental health in many ways. And so if we're already dealing with particular challenges, perhaps this is a time where they are increased or in a negative way. And this pandemic can affect us in many different ways, and it's not the same for everyone. And the situation and the reality is changing day by day. But the effect that it's having on our own psyche, our own bodies, our own spirituality, and our own relationships is something that's really important. It's not just specific to the Muslim community. It's a societal issue at large, and there are many services and avenues available for us as well. So this is part of the conversation today, is to highlight how this has impacted, or how this has impacted our communities and ourselves, but then to also understand how we can move in a positive, or have a positive response to these circumstances, and then of course the available services that are there to support us during this time. So that's enough from me. I'm not here to give you the talk. I'm here to introduce our speakers. So what I'll do is I'll pass it on to our two very special guests who I actually had personal recommendations to get in touch with. So we're really happy and really grateful to have these two people on board with this program. So inshallah, as this is an ongoing conversation, inshallah we can also have an episode 2 or a part 2 if the circumstances permit. So I'll pass it on, given that Brother Mohamed will go anti-clockwise, and so I'll let Brother Mohamed to introduce himself, and we'll go from there. So Brother Mohamed.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulih al-Kareem. Wa ala alihi wa ashabihi wa man istanna bi sunnatihi ila yawmiddin. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. I'm your brother, for those who don't know me, Mohamed Rima. I'm an individual and marriage counselor. I'm also a co-founder and manager of Markaz Imam Ahmed, which is a Islamic center in the heart of Liverpool. So yeah, I don't know if you've heard about that Markaz, that masjid, MIA, otherwise known as. And I focus a lot on the youth and marriages, their mental health and their well-being. My passion, what got me here in the first place was my passion in working with the youth. Me myself having, a past sort of a thing, and you want to give back and help out the community, the youth, so they don't go through the same stuff you went through, and offer them some services that you can, So that's a little bit about me. Alhamdulillah.
Lovely. All right, Sister Zena, can you please introduce yourself as well? Thanks.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. My name is Zena Nikro. I'm the owner of my advice, which started out as a psychology practice in Sydney, but we've now transitioned into an allied health clinic. I've been practicing as a psychologist for almost 12 years now. I'm a generalist psychologist, which means I see a wide range of presentations across the board, from your everyday stress, anxiety, depression, to the more acute presentations like schizophrenia, psychosis, etc. I'm also a co-founder of Gem and Zen, which is a not-for-profit wellbeing initiative where we aim to promote mental health awareness and smash the stigma around mental health, and just to approach the community from a proactive, a kind of proactive approach rather than a reactive one, because we know prevention is better than the cure. So we kind of aim to give people tips on how to recognize early warning signs and deal with them, so that they're less likely to snowball into something more severe.
MashaAllah. Alhamdulillah. So as you can see, we're very well qualified guests who not only in their areas of study, but of course also within their community. So let's start with you, Sister Zena. Can we introduce this discussion in the sense that what are we dealing with at the moment? Social isolation, what does that mean, and what sort of impact do you think that has had, and based on your own theoretical knowledge as well as a practical experience?
Sure. So, obviously, no one kind of saw something like this coming. We basically, fell asleep in one world and then we woke up in another. So it's been, a huge adjustment for a lot of people, and it wasn't something that, you would sort of see from a mile away. I think, in terms of the social distancing, it's obviously, having huge impacts, not just on, I guess, it's not just something that's impacting people who, are extroverts and like to get out. But obviously we see the memes and things like that. But it's been really difficult for all of us, I think, one way or another. Alhamdulillah. A lot of the things that we're seeing is that the people who are really struggling at this time are usually people who have had pre-existing mental health conditions. So, for example, we're finding someone with very high anxiety and depression at the moment had actually had these symptoms before the virus, but it became exacerbated as a result of the stress of the quarantine. So as well, people who are on the brink of divorce, that's quite common now. Again, usually they would have had marital issues prior to the virus, and it's almost like the virus has been like a pressure cooker in that sense, where it's been, really hard for them to cope with the changes, and just how difficult it's been in terms of the stress and the uncertainty of it all. So this is a very typical anyway of what we already know of how stress can impact the mind and body, and how it can make, any condition worse, basically. There are so many other impacts as well. I mean, I could go on. I'm not sure, how much detail you want me to go into.
Well, let's I think you've said a lot. Let's unpack some of those points, because we can highlight and unpack that further. But Brother Mohammed, as a manager of Markaz Imam Ahmed, so obviously very intimately connected to the community there, and based on your own experience, what have you gauged so far?
Just like Sister Zena said, it has impacted everyone, adults, children, teenagers, everyone from every walk of life. But what I've actually seen is, I've seen positives and negatives, to be honest. So I don't want to just focus on, I know there's a lot of negatives, but I have seen both. So for example, negative wise, those who are sort of battling, substance abuse, addiction, and mixed with other mental health issues, they had outlets. They had places to go, people to see, community services, and a lot of that stopped. Okay, so the negative that I've seen in people like that is the substance abuse has become worse, because they're just at home, they don't know what to do, and they're just stuck in between four walls, pretty much, usually with family members that they don't get along with. So then that snowballs into some other issues now. Okay. In regards to the positives, it's just directly opposite that. I actually know a lot of brothers who are actually, they're sober now. It's been, like their 14th day, 15th day without any drugs, or without any gambling. It's this calamity, or this pandemic has really forced them to step up. So it was already on their mind. They already felt guilty before that. So this was the cherry on top that sort of said, that's it. I'm going to quit. I'm going to straighten up my life. And, you know, so there are positives as well. And from the positives is there's a lot of husbands as well, and wives, children, you know, everyone's connecting again. Everyone's like, wow, I never knew, you know, I never knew that I can get so close with my children. You know, I've become closer to them now than I ever was, because, you know, the father was stuck in the office, at work, you know, stuck in traffic 2, 3, 4 hours a day. So now, for these, you know, for some people, this has actually become something very beneficial. They're changing their perspective, because there's a lot of material that's been spread online and otherwise that's telling us to change our perspective. So, you know, I've seen people do that, and alhamdulillah, you know, children as well getting along. I know there's a lot of disasters, which we'll get to that later, but these are the positives.
Yeah. Okay, I think that's a good point to start on the relationships and the impact relationships have had with you know, the current situation. Now, of course, a lot of us are at home. Many of us, you know, work was a getaway, right? Maybe even from marriage for a little bit, or from you know, other siblings or people in the house. And I can understand that some people now have to confront these relationships, or sort of actually not confront, or deal with this situation now that they're at home. Sister Zena, how do you think that relationships in particular have been focused, and what can we do about that?
So what was your question about relationships, how it's been focused, in what sense?
Yeah, so how do you think that our relationships have been impacted specifically in terms of our mental health?
Yeah, okay. So, you know, as I mentioned before, you know, what we're seeing now is acting almost like a pressure cooker, I guess, in some sense. So where people had already, I guess, some stress or some difficulties in their relationship, now it's kind of being exacerbated. And like you mentioned, there were usually, I guess, ways that some people would cope with certain stresses in their life. So say, for example, people might go to work, you know, and they'll kind of get a break. So in getting that break, they're able to recharge their batteries, come back home. And say, for example, if they've got a toxic family member, they then have the sort of energy and ability to be able to deal with them. But what we're seeing here is obviously they no longer have that chance to take that break. A lot of people used to use training and going to the gym as a way of, you know, having a break and just getting a bit of distance from people that they may get along with at home. But obviously now that's sort of taken away from them, and they've had to, you know, find other ways to try and cope with it.
Okay, Brother Mohamed, so what can we do about this? Because it's a weird situation, and you know, people are struggling in many ways, and then put the relationship as like the cherry on top. What can we do about this?
As a community, do you mean, or as individuals?
As individuals and as a community, yeah.
Okay, so what can we do about this is, first and foremost, we need to understand, you know, why this is happening from an Islamic perspective, first and foremost. So, you know, why does Allah send calamities to people? Why does Allah send calamities to a community? Why does He send it to individuals? What plagues have happened in our Islamic history? You know, we need to look at all these just to get a correct understanding onto what's happening, because there's a lot of, you know, conspiracy theories, or there's a lot of talk, even Islamically as well. You know, you hear sometimes the beatdowns, you know, Allah's punishing every single one of us because we're all crap, you know. So we need to understand why this is happening from an Islamic perspective, which, Allahu A'lam, I'm no scholar in Deen, but all calamities are from Allah Azza wa Jal, you know, and everything He decrees, we believe as Muslims that everything He allows to happen has good in it, even if we don't see that good. You know, for example, the creation of Iblis, the devil. What good is there in him? You know, what good is there in that in Allah creating Iblis, for example? There's many benefits. You know, without Iblis, you know, to cut it short, is there'll be no test, there'll be no hell, there'll be no heaven. You know, so there's benefits or there's good in everything Allah Azza wa Jal allows to decree. Right? Then you got the ahadith, you know, where the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Ajaban li amri al-mu'min, inna amrahu kulluhu lahu khair." Roughly translated is, you know, how amazing is the affair of the believer, that all his affairs are good, right? And he continues to say that this is not for anyone except a believer. So you can make good out of these things. So that's the first point. The second point is, like every other calamity, we can either pass it or we can fail it. It's an examination. So this is our chance to pass that. And that's not to say that you won't feel anxious, you won't have mental health issues, you won't feel sad, or you won't feel depressed. That's not to say that. That doesn't mean you failed. It's to understand it and to make good of it, to make use of it. Okay. So I think they're the 2 points we need to understand first and foremost, that why Allah Azza wa Jal allowed this to happen. Okay. It's not the first time it's happened. It will pass, inshallah. Okay. And as individuals, we need to just be following guidelines and, you know, what the professionals say, the doctors, you know, what the government tell us to do with the social distancing and you know, all the limitations. I know we get angry. Oh, you know, why the government release this law? We can't do this, we can't do that. But alhamdulillah, I mean, it's good, you know, there's good in it. Otherwise, I mean, you want it to be like other countries where they were reckless in this regard, and then it just spread, you know. So we just need to follow, you know, our leadership and you know, make the most out of this situation. And as individuals, just to end, we need to take care of ourselves first and foremost, and each other. So not just to be selfish, but to put ourselves first and foremost, as Allah Azza wa Jal commanded us. Ya ayyuhal ladhina amanu qu anfusakum wa ahlikum nara, which means, you know, we take from these principles that you take care of yourself first and foremost, then you know, your family, and then and so on and so forth.
Sister Zena, from a scientific point of view, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I was just going to say, while we're talking about the positives that come out of this, I thought I'd just mention that, you know, of course, everything in this world contains both good and bad, except that which is divine, of course. So think about it. Everything has its good and bad side, including things that everyone yearns for, such as being married. So, you know, whilst there is love and compassion and a beautiful unmatched bond, there's also a lot of hard work and compromise. You know, think about something like having children. Whilst they bring so much meaning and joy to our life, they also bring so much stress and worries and exhaustion. So similarly, anything in life other than that which is divine will pretty much be the same. So this virus and the situation we find ourselves in has been emotionally turbulent at times, but I would have to say also that there's been, you know, a lot of good that's come out of it as well. There is really a beautiful wisdom in the pause and a benefit that comes with tribulation. So some of the benefits here is that the world has been allowed to pause and breathe and heal. You know, I'm sure we've all seen pictures of the waters clearing up in Venice. You know, animals are being allowed to thrive once more. Pollution is at its all-time low. And I think, you know, we were heading in a really bad way. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is simply fixing what was broken. And He's restoring order in a way that, you know, we humanly, it wasn't within our human capability to do so. So it's, I guess, there has been some positives, and a few other positives as well, is that it's changed and revolutionized the way workplaces and schools operate. So all of a sudden now these institutions can start making use of technology, and I guess they're a lot more inclusive with, especially with regards to people who have disabilities and special needs. You know, whereas previously they were probably you know, largely neglected. So we're also, I guess, grateful for the ability to reconnect with God, because it's in challenging times that we draw closer to Him. So alhamdulillah for that also.
There's actually, yeah, I think that's really good that we both focused on that, because this conversation can really go into the whole negative side of things very, very quickly. But while we're on there, Sister Zena, can you unpack or maybe shed some light on in terms of the impact social isolation can have on our brains or on our mind from a scientific point of view? Because there's a lot of science behind this, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, the social isolation in this particular context is probably different to, you know, different kinds of social isolation, because there's that added experience of fear and anxiety around what could possibly happen. You know, so there can be a lot of focus on, okay, what's going to happen to me now? You know, is there, you know, going to be, am I going to be facing loss of my family members? There could be potential loss of income, if not already, you know, loss of people's way of life and their goals. So I'm not sure if you've heard of Abraham Maslow's triangle, his Abraham Maslow's pyramid, yeah? So there's different levels of needs in that pyramid. And I guess the basic concept behind that is that, you know, we cannot progress to fulfilling the higher needs in that pyramid without the base needs being fulfilled first. So, you know, one of the lower needs is physiological safety. So, you know, people right now are understandably focused on survival. The brain is in survival mode because it doesn't feel safe, you know, and it doesn't feel as though the basic need of physiological safety is being met. So it's going to be really difficult for people to, you know, study, for them to actually, you know, focus on exams, for them to build, you know, meaningful connections with others. It just makes it so much more difficult when, you know, their basic need of not feeling physiologically safe is not being met.
Okay. Interesting. Brother Mohammed, since you're managing MIA, how has that impact? How have you noticed the impact of that? The closure of the places of worship, which are pretty much social places for us as well. So, how have you understood that?
Yes, very good question. It's had a big impact, a large impact on, you know, I know I can speak on behalf of MIA, but I have spoken to other mosque committees or, you know, regular goers to other mosques, and it's the same. It's the same thing. It's the same feedback that they're actually very sad that they can't, you know, do their daily rituals, which was to come here maybe for Fajr, Isha, a lecture, you know, the Quran college, for example. They had classes. There was a lot of things happening, and all that's come to a stop. And the masjid was the place where people would come and socialize, as you said. You know, they'll catch up with each other, and yeah, just have that bond. But it's come to a stop, and it's affected a lot of people. You know, a lot of people are very, very sad that I've spoken with. Some people have started. What they do is they call up each other and like a video call or a WhatsApp chat, like similar to this, and yeah, and they check up on the regulars that used to come and see them. But the feedback's all the same, bro. It's affected a lot of people. This was their social hub, and now they don't know what to do. You know.
What can we do from a practical point of view in terms of how can we channel this lost energy from the loss of our social spaces or places of worship? Where can we focus this now, or what can we do about this, Sister Zena? You can contribute to that.
You mean just in terms of social connection?
Yeah, because there's a void now. Yeah. How do we fill that void, at least temporarily?
Okay. There's a lot of ways that we can still connect and make meaningful social connections with others. We're lucky enough that we're not completely restricted in the way that I guess we can do things. So some ways is that, you know, you can I guess very much like we're doing now, organize regular Zoom meetings or WhatsApp video calls, FaceTime and things like that, where, you know, you're able to connect virtually with friends, family members and things like that. It's obviously not the same, but we take what we can get, and it's something that can still reproduce some of that, you know, the really good connection that we're looking for, and that I guess creating a different kind of social space, a virtual social space, so to speak.
Okay. Also, Brother Mohamed, what about the impact of loss of income and loss of jobs? Have you noticed that impact on the ground? And how are people doing with that?
Yeah, I have my client intake has increased with a lot of people who have lost their jobs. They come and see me because they're feeling sad and depressed, or, you know, uncertain. There's a lot of uncertainty, and it has impacted their mental health as well, and it has increased, and it does snowball as well. So what happens is they lose their job, then they can't pay rent, so they start to use their savings. You know, some people don't even have savings; they were living week by week. And they get affected straight away, and then it affects, you know, the relationships at home, even between the children as well. I've had a few cases where Centrelink, you know, it takes time for Centrelink to approve you, right? About 6 weeks or so. So I mean, there's some people that have to borrow money just to get by that 6 weeks to pay rent, you know. And this affects, especially, like, you know, for men, because I see a lot of men, it affects their manhood, if you know what I mean, you know, their manliness, their masculinity, that they're the providers, you know, they're the people that, you know, bring home the bread and the butter. And now that they can't do that, they feel ashamed, you know. And yeah, and, you know, they do suffer from depression. And you know, alhamdulillah, there's a lot of Islamic organizations around Sydney that are helping out these people. So they are reaching out, and if anyone's listening to this and this sounds like you know, reach out to any professional, and we can get you, you know, the correct help and the correct service, inshallah.
With that, people who are in sort of unfavorable circumstances, or more so from previous experiences, how do you think this has impacted them? So I know there has been a bit of discussion around victims of domestic violence, other abuse in their relationships. Sister Zena, how do you think, or from your experience, has there been an increase in that?
Definitely. You know, obviously women who, or even men who are being made to spend more time with their abusers, naturally there will be an increase in domestic violence. So that's unfortunately like a very difficult thing that's come about. And I think it's the same for children who usually feel safe at school are now, you know, I mean, I guess school is not really an option after the 2 weeks holidays. You know, most schools will be closed, and they're kind of moving to online learning, so that makes it more difficult for those children. So I would, you know, have to say, I mean, I know our community is not very, I guess, don't always know the right things to do when they're aware of perhaps a woman who's being abused, or a child who might be in an abusive household. So I really would urge everyone who does see, something very worrying, or who is under the impression that, or is aware that this is going on, then you would need to reach out to, I guess, some hotlines just in order to, I guess, help that person, because usually those people, the victims of abuse, they're quite unlikely to reach out themselves and try to get that assistance that they need. So there are some numbers which you can call if you're aware of someone, or even if someone's listening at the moment and they're in a really difficult position where they're not safe and their children are not safe. You can call FLAX, for example. You can call 1-800-RESPECT, which is the DV hotline. You can even call 000. So it's important to know that calling 000 is not just for certain emergencies, but it's also if you're feeling unsafe, or if your child is unsafe, or if you know that your neighbour's not safe at the moment. So, definitely do reach out and assist that person.
Let's come back to this bit, but I know Brother Mohammed's probably has a little bit to say from his experience in this specific sphere. Did you have anything to add there, bro?
Yeah, definitely. I totally agree. I mean, with me personally, and I have spoken to a lot of other social workers, counsellors, psychologists, domestic violence cases has increased dramatically. I mean, I can't stress how bad it is. With me personally, right? If I see, let's say, 6 clients a day, 5-6 clients a day, at least 3 of them have domestic violence issues. Some are very bad, worse than others. So it has increased definitely. Just what Sister Zena said as well. If you do know someone who has previously been in these situations, call them up. Don't say, I'm just checking on you because you were in a domestic violence thing. Don't do that. But reach out to them, call them up, and just say, look, I'm bored. This COVID-19 is really stressing me out. Just checking how you're doing. You know what I mean? And you'll give them that space to sort of check in on them, just seeing how they are and so forth. But make it out as if it's you. That's why you're calling. You're not calling to check up directly on their domestic violence. I know that's the tip I found useful. So yeah, if you do know people, reach out to them definitely. But in practice, in counselling, it has increased a lot.
Also, I know from a psychology point of view, people have got access to telephone or telehealth services now.
Yes,
can you explain a little bit of that?
Yeah, so it's a really fantastic government initiative that's come about now, where people are able to now access online counselling as well as phone counselling, and it's free of charge via Medicare and a few other government programs as well. So it's not just Medicare, which means that if someone doesn't have Medicare, or if they don't really want to go and see their GP about what's going on, then you don't really need a referral. And then if it's via Medicare, then of course you would need to go to the GP to get a referral. And this is basically now opened up Australia-wide. So even though, for example, the person that you want to see is in Sydney, and you're in Melbourne or Perth or anywhere else, you can still choose to see that particular psychologist because of that new government initiative where you can access online telehealth consultations.
So you can basically you can make an appointment. You need a referral from the doctor first, or you can see a psychologist over the phone at any time. Is that how it works?
That's right, exactly. So you would basically contact them in order to book an appointment. The psychologist that you'd want to see. You don't necessarily need a referral. If you are going via the Medicare route, then yes, of course you would need a referral. But there are also other government programs that some psychologists are registered with. For example, the PHN, it's called the Primary Health Network, and you can access some services via. There's some you have to meet some requirements. So depending on whether you meet the requirements or not, you can also access the telehealth without a referral for a limited number of sessions.
And so are you noticing a surge in patients or on consultations over the last few weeks ago?
With our existing clients, yes, there is a lot of existing clients who want more frequent appointments. But in terms of new referrals, there has been a bit of a dip that we've noticed, a bit of a slowing down. And I think that this is quite normal considering the circumstances when people are, like I said, really focused on survival and figuring out how they're going to, get another job, how they're going to get through, the next few months, what they're going to do in terms of their income being severely impacted, or even, that basic ability to feel safe and to survive. Then there can be, it's less likely for them to reach out for help at that time. So we're expecting that there's going to be a surge shortly, where once things settle down a little bit for people and they're feeling a bit more in control, they'll definitely be reaching out for help, especially as they start to feel more overwhelmed.
Brother Mohamed, can you talk about the stigma in the Muslim community around this whole idea of mental health and reaching out for help, particularly from a male perspective?
Definitely, it is something that is, it's looked down upon. It's dismissed. It's not considered. There's many factors why the male Muslims are like this, but maybe some things are the way we've been brought up. To always have a tough image. Man up, as they say. If you've got a problem, you try to open up to some family member, your father or a brother or a mate. The basic advice you'd get as a bloke is man up. So that type of experiences instills in us to sort of not reach out when we need help, especially when it comes to our emotions, because we're told to sort of suppress them. And men don't show their weak side. There's that as well. This is with all male. It's not just Muslims, but it is in the Muslim community. So that's one reason why. Also, there's some shame attached to it. So if you go to see a psychologist or a counsellor, they think, or the belief out there is that you're automatically mental. Okay, you're stupid. There's something wrong with you. You're crazy. So all these things are attached to it. So therefore, they don't reach out, or if they do, they got all these negative, attachments to it. And lastly, also, it's not encouraged. So if a man or a male member of the family is displaying patterns of depression, for example, or anxiety, or any mental health issues, it's not encouraged in our culture to support them first and foremost, to show empathy. That's a problem I find that we don't have as, in our community, within our family households. So we don't know how to sit next to our brother or our sister and say, hey bro, hey sis, is everything okay? Tell me how you've been feeling today. Tell me one good thing that's happened to you today. Tell me one bad thing that's happened to you today. Share your thoughts with me. We don't talk like that. It's like, we sit sort of next to our brothers, like we don't want to talk or even look at them. It's not because we hate them, we love them, but it's how we've been brought up, not to talk about emotions. So it's not encouraged within our family household to say, hey, I know a counsellor, here's a number, or here's a psychologist, so on and so forth. He's pretty cool, she's pretty cool, she won't judge you, so forth. We don't do that as much. And we need to understand that mental health, it is an illness. It's an invisible one. That's why we downplay it. It's invisible. And just like physical health, right? We take that seriously. So if someone's cut their arm, they're bleeding, we all run because we see blood. We run to we call 000. We got our first aid kits. We're wrapping it up. We're checking, is this person all right? Which is good, and this is what we should do. But there should be something similar to that with mental health. So it's the scar is just not visible; it's invisible. But it does affect us, and not just the same. It actually affects us worse or far more harder than physical illness. For example, with a physical illness, once it heals, you've sort of forgotten about it. With a emotional illness or a mental illness, you would remember, when you were in kindergarten, when someone hurt your feelings, right? Something will trigger that. Maybe you're driving past, you're having a good day, and then you drive past your school, and then you remember when you were in kindergarten what happened, and you will, it'll trigger you. It'll trigger your depression or anxiety or self-esteem, and you start to have these negative thoughts. So if something is able to impact you when you're 40, 50 years old, that happened to you while you were 5 years old, I would say it's far worse than physical illness, even though both are serious.
Okay. What message do you have to the community to change this sort of culture of stigma?
My message to the brothers and the sisters is take your mental health seriously. It does impact your physical health. So for example, when I talk about marriages, right? If you have a unhealthy marriage and you're constantly in fights and criticizing each other and putting each other down, and the years go by, you're just unhappy. You don't want to go home. There's no sakina at home. There's no tranquility or safety at home anymore, and the relationship is very toxic. Some research does show that people who are in unhappy or unhealthy marriages actually die earlier, by about 6 years or so. This study by the University of Michigan, that people who are in unhealthy marriages and unhappy, in constant fight or flight mode, so to speak, because that's what happens when you're in a fight. These people die earlier, or they get sick, and it's a constant strain on your heart. So mental health does impact your physical health in the long run. So
Sister Zena,
the message is,
what are things
to get out there and get some help. Yeah.
Absolutely, get out there and get some help. All right.
That's it.
Sister Zena, can you unpack some? How can we monitor, and what are the things that we should look out for to notice that our mental health is being negatively affected or deteriorating?
I think it's important to firstly highlight that it's very normal to have I guess low mood or to feel nervous, scared at times. We all have low mood. We all feel feelings of anxiety. And this is something that's very normal. It's something that's built into us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us this way. And He told us that He's going to test us with anxiety and difficulties and challenges and these kind of things. But I think, when anxiety or depression or any kind of other symptoms starts to interfere with your ability to live your life, and to interfere with your ability to function, that's when it starts to become a problem. So say, for example, it's been a few weeks and, you're going through a very stressful time, and it's, 2-3 weeks later, if you're still having difficulty getting out of bed, if you're, very teary, very emotional, having difficulty sleeping, you might have a loss of appetite or an increase in appetite. You might notice, certain changes that's just out of character. And if they're extending for, 2 or so weeks on end, then you may need to reach out and speak to someone, speak to a psychologist, a counsellor, your GP, anyone that, you trust. And, perhaps they can point you in the right direction.
What are also, whilst we're on that, what are steps that we can take to improve our mental health? Just general ones.
I think, you know, when it comes to improving our mental health and dealing with the difficult things that we go through, one of the main ways is by building a large array of coping strategies. So there are so many different types of coping strategies. I think, in fact, the internet's probably filled with some really great tips from professionals and therapists. But I think for the sake of brevity, like I might just go through two coping strategies. One is coping through the use of spiritual strength. And the other one, if we have time, I might go through coping through the use of practicing self-compassion. So starting with the spiritual strengths, I think tapping into our own spiritual coping mechanisms is a really great way to help us develop some acceptance of not only what's happening at the moment, but also what's to come in the future. So sometimes spiritual coping can be as simple as giving ourselves just gentle reminders of what we already know to be true. And we can use that as a way to bring balance back into our perspective, especially when we find our perspective is very negative or extreme. So when you're stressed, you're more likely to, think in a very negative or extreme way. Gentle reminders are so effective that the Prophet ﷺ even said our deen is nasiha, which means giving gentle advice and reminders. Why is that the case? That's because God created us to be forgetful. So naturally, we need to remind ourselves of what it is that we've forgotten. The fact that we forget things is itself a blessing in a lot of ways, but I won't go into that. But because we have a tendency to forget things, we need to gently remind ourselves of what is important and what is rational and what is a more balanced viewpoint. So if I was to give you an example, something that clients keep raising at the moment in the context of coronavirus is what's going to happen to us in the future. Are we going to run out of food, out of resources? So we basically work with them to address that question from a rational standpoint. So for example, we might gently challenge that and say, okay, let's just sort of think about that thought. Is it really the case? Is that really a possibility? How possible is that when Australia produces more than 3 times the amount of food that we need or consume? We have one of the highest levels of food wastage compared to other countries globally. And the way to address, an irrational or a fearful thought like this from a spiritual standpoint is by gently reminding ourselves that our rizq is already ordained for us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is al-Razzaq. So the shelves of Woolworths and Coles may run out, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's supplies are endless. And from his endless supplies, he has portioned for us our provisions. So that means, obviously not a single morsel of food is going to reach our mouths unless it was written as part of our rizq. Even the amount of breaths that we take is preordained and written. So we will continue to live and breathe until there is no longer any particle of air that has our name written on it. And this is coronavirus or not. So when it is our time, there will of course be a sabab, meaning there will be a reason which leads to our passing. But ultimately the true cause is that our time was up and our Lord wished to take us back to him. If this is something that induces anxiety in someone, I would say try using other gentle reminders that you can think of that might bring some balance back into your perspective. So for example, reminding yourself that we have a truly merciful Lord and his mercy far outweighs his wrath. He forgives all sins bar one. We will continue to look after our loved ones not only while we are alive, but long after we're gone. And of course, even with loss, there is so much gain. So, etc., etc. You just kind of keep going on in this way, reminding yourself using gentle Islamic reminders. But if you notice that you continue to experience anxiety even after using gentle reminders often, I would recommend reaching out to someone because there could be more targeted strategies that you may need to use. There could even be something biologically at play there which needs to be treated. So, again, like I mentioned earlier, thankfully in this time we've been able to provide online and phone counselling. It's more affordable, more accessible than ever because it's free of charge. So definitely something worth, looking into. And it's something that you can take advantage of even if you just feel overwhelmed and you really want to talk to someone. So that's, I guess, how you can use reminders or Islamic principles and how you can tie that into our everyday life, I guess, to help us to cope. I'm not sure if I have time to go into the self-compassion side. Maybe later on.
Yeah, please touch on it. Let's continue with that.
Okay.
Yeah, sure.
So I don't know how well known this topic is, or if anyone's really heard of self-compassion and what it is. But it's basically, as the name suggests, so it's about being warm and understanding towards ourselves when we suffer, when we fail, when we don't feel good enough. So rather than ignoring our pain or, criticizing ourselves, berating ourselves, self-compassion sort of helps people recognize and realize that actually being imperfect and failing is a very normal human experience. It's human to fail. It's all part of this experience. So it's definitely a great skill to have and to work on. I think, for the sake of brevity, I might just touch on 3 very practical strategies that you can make use of while trying to practice what we call self-compassion. The first practice is called soothing touch. And this involves basically giving yourself a hug in a way, or just gently placing your hand over your heart like this. And you do so in a soothing gesture. When you do something like this, your physiology is actually triggered, and your certain areas of the brain are activated and you release oxytocin. So it's quite powerful. And I think, for Muslims, because, we don't usually talk about these things like self-compassion, etc. If this is something that you've never heard of before, you might be thinking it sounds a bit strange or funny. But if you think about it, we actually do this 5 times a day, every day, as part of our prayer. So we place our hands like this on our chest, and it's as though we're giving ourselves a warm embrace. So think about that the next time that you are praying. Be mindful in your prayer, increase your khushu', and be mindful of the soothing touch as well, that you're sort of placing your hand like this, and it can be quite, it can generate a feeling of healing. The second one that I wanted to talk about is one that I love and that I use a lot. It's a type of breathing exercise that can actually slow down and calm the brain, especially when you're getting racing thoughts or you're feeling quite anxious. It's a great way to just immediately calm things down and slow your brain down. It involves tuning into the soothing rhythm of your breath. So when you focus on every inhale and exhale for an extended period of time, it actually lulls you into a calm sensation. And in fact, when I do this, when I run the mindfulness workshops, people usually end up falling asleep. So it can be really powerful and very relaxing if it's used in the right way. That's why sports athletes, they are actually told to focus on their breathing to enhance their performance. And when people do zikr mindfully, they time the rhythm of their breathing to the words that they are saying. So if you wanted to get the most out of that, you can combine, that deep breathing with some zikr in remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in order to, feel very calm. The third one that I wanted to just go through quickly is another really great one. It helps you to sort of ground and anchor yourself when you're feeling very overwhelmed and emotionally unstable. And it's called Savoring Things and Gratitude. So we're all becoming, very virus wary right now, and we're yearning for more joy in life, more, connection and things like that. Unfortunately for us, joy is close at hand if we give ourselves the permission to enjoy the simple things that we still have. So, for example, savoring a nice meal, that's a great way to do to practice that. or by taking yourself on a walk in the fresh air. You know, at the moment, we're still allowed to go for a walk and to exercise outdoors in the park. So this practice involves just letting yourself fully enjoy and take in what is beautiful or interesting to you. And that might be the bark of a tree, the songs of birds, the smell of a flower, you know, just being able to see the world with fresh eyes. And of course, gratitude, you know, is another way of cultivating joy. And it's something that as Muslims, you know, we're told to give thanks and to make shukr. So it's about noticing the small things that we still have and that enrich our lives, things that we tend to overlook, you know, something simple as, you know, being grateful for running water or the morning sunlight. Even just, I think, being able to, you know, buy hand sanitizers, for example. You know, there are countries where they don't have access to these things, and even social isolation and quarantine is not something that they can do easily, you know, because of the proximity and how they live. So we're quite lucky in that regard. And I guess, you know, mentioning these points is not to sort of dismiss any concerns or any feelings that anyone is having. But I think, you know, being able to practice gratitude and to look at the things that we do have and that we can enjoy and benefit from is a really great way to calm ourselves and to sort of help us to cope as well.
I think that's really, really practical. I definitely took away a couple of those things that I could implement in my life, inshallah. Just before we wrap up, I want to get some thoughts from Brother Mohamed in terms of some practical tips that you have, and then we'll go into our final thoughts, inshallah.
So I'll start off with some practical, easy tips for couples. So we should, you know, every marriage, every couple should have some form of rituals. Okay, so that could be things like date nights, for example, parties, reunions. You know, when people, you know, when they come back home, you know, the places they go, people they see. So that's a lot of that has come to an end. So what we need to do is have COVID-19 rituals, as I call it. So couples should plan these out, and they could be very simple things, and they'll be very different things. And once you try it, you'll actually enjoy it. So some rituals you can do is date night at home, for example. So still get yourself dressed up in, you know, in some nice clothes, groom yourself up, make yourself feel good, because when we get dressed, we actually feel good, you know. When we have a shower, put a, you know, our best clothes on and so forth, it actually makes us feel good. You know, and have a meeting point, tell your wife where to meet you, or your husband for the ladies. And, you know, you can go in the backyard, have a picnic blanket, get the laptop out, watch Netflix, have some candles, you know, all that type of romantic stuff. And watch a movie, for example, in the backyard, you know, maybe light the barbecue as well. You know, there's a lot of things you can do. So, I mean, that's just one tip. The other one, so the first one is date night at home, get dressed for it. And the second ritual is partings and reunions. So whenever one of you leave the home, make sure you say goodbye to each other, okay? And part of that ritual would be to give each other, this is part of the Gottman Institute technique, is that give your partner a 6-second kiss. And it's actually, it's got some science behind it, the reason why it's 6 seconds, you know, because there's a lot of potential to, you know, after that 6 second. And when you kiss or embrace your partner, you know, a lot of happy hormones are released in your brain, and you know, it helps you be happy and to keep on going throughout that day. So that's on parting. On reunions, you know, meet your spouse at the door. You know, don't just sort of you know, lay down on your phone or whatever. Or you might be busy as well with the kids, because I know it's hectic being at home now. So, but whatever it is you're doing, unless it's an emergency or something, you know, that you can't leave, stop it, leave it, and, you know, greet your partner at the door. You know, give them another hug, another 6-second kiss. If they're carrying bags or whatnot, take it off them. A quick, how are you? How was your day? You know, and then you can carry on, you know. So that's the second ritual, is pardons and reunions of the day. The third one is I suggest to my clients for couples to go and buy a plant from Bunnings or wherever and plant a tree. So they'll buy a tree each, all right? They'll plant it and they can name it, their spouse's name. The aim behind it is to remind each other that as this tree needs nurturing, so does my spouse, so does the relationship, you know. And you know, it's very powerful and it's fun at the same time. And lastly, I'd like to mention to practice gratitude. Okay, we know shukr in Islam is very you know, it's commanded upon us. Allah Azza wa Jal does mention many times that those who give shukr, Allah would increase for them, and those who are ungrateful, He actually threatens them with a punishment. You know, so practice gratitude with your spouse, right? So every day, let each spouse sort of tell the other, you know, their partner, one thing that they like from their, you know, that they did, and it could be the small things, and that's what you have to focus on. It has to be the small things. Don't expect to say thank you or, you know, I'm grateful for only big things. You know, that's what we've been programmed to believe. Focus on the small things, like for example, doing the bedroom, for example. You know, picking up the kids from wherever, or doing the shopping, or being able to find hand sanitizer or toilet paper. You know, because every time your wife or your partner, you know, your husband or your wife leave the home to go and get some supply, it's like they're on a battlefield, you know. So when they come back, celebrate their victory as they, you know, wow, you found some, you know, some stuff. So practice gratitude in this format. So say, I appreciate, and then mention what they did, right? And it be very particular. So I appreciate, you know, or I'm grateful for, and then mention, you know, what they did. So it could be something as small as cooking dinner, for example. Then link what they did with a personality trait. So you say, I appreciate dinner. You're such a good cook, for example, or you're so thoughtful of the family. What that does is you do that every day to each other, right? Thank you for going to work. I appreciate you going to work. You're a very, you know, responsible husband, for example. Thank you for taking care of the kids. I know it's pretty chaotic and hectic. You know, you're such a good mother. So you're linking the deed with a personality trait. There's many benefits. I'll just quickly wrap it up. One benefit is that it instills that personality trait to come out more and flourish in your partner. Number two, it shows your partner that you're in tune with them. So you're realizing these small things. Because a lot of the times couples are making bids for connection, as we call it, but they go unseen. And this is one of the bids for connection, that you can, you know, see that your spouse is trying to connect with you at that time. And yeah, there's potential there for conversations to grow, and just to make your spouse feel good that you are aware of all the small things that they do. So there's a lot more we can go into, but that's just, I think, the best takeaways for people to practice.
On an individual level, what about for people who, for example, I think we've got a question there, for people who are living by themselves, or our single brothers and sisters as well? Does that change anything?
Yeah, we left them out, didn't we? Okay, so if they're struggling with difficult emotions, okay, if an individual, I mean, Sister Zena already gave some good tips there that they can practice. I can add one more. So if an individual is dealing with difficult emotions, practice the breathing, you know, the deep breathing skills that Sister Zena mentioned. And then you can add to that is become aware of your emotions. So try to identify where this emotion is coming from. You know, is it are my fists clenching, for example? Is my heart racing? You know, is my stomach turning? Are my legs shaking, for example? You know, are my shoulders tense? So try to find out where this emotion is coming from, And then what you can do, so that's step one. Step two is name the emotion. So you say, okay, this is anger, or this is sadness. Try to name the emotion that you're experiencing at that time. Okay, this is all while you're breathing at the same time. Okay. Step three would be accept that emotion. Don't push it away. Don't try to dumb it down or say, you know, this is not happening to me. It can't happen to me. I'm just going to ignore it. No, accept it. It's happening. You need to accept it and don't deny it. Step four would be realize that this emotion won't last forever. Even if it feels overwhelming, which it will, just remember that it'll pass, just like all your previous difficult emotions have passed in the past. Step number five is then to start to be a detective. So take a step back, right, or step out of the situation. So just imagine that you actually took a step back and you're looking at yourself from the outside, and try to be a detective. You know, ask yourself, what triggered this feeling? Why am I feeling this way? You know, was it what I saw on TV? Was it what my boss said at work? What triggered it? And then try to identify it. And then step six is to totally let go the need to control that emotion. Okay, so instead of fearing what's going to unfold, let go and get ready to, you know, whatever unfolds after that. What that does is it helps you become calm. You've accepted that you know, that difficult emotion, and it'll leave you quicker than you trying to push it away. So I think that's for the individual brothers. That's something you can do. And lastly, you can add, you know, as Sister Zena said, is deep breathing along with your tasbih and, you know, your dhikr or that type of stuff. I know it's hard, easier said than done, but if we control our breathing and then just branch off from that, it'll help us definitely. And if you forgot everything I said, try to pinpoint the emotion and name it and let it go. No.
Alhamdulillah. Well, it's all recorded, so you could easily just rewind a little bit and then listen to that again, inshallah. Sister Zena, did you have anything to add to that, or we could move into our final thoughts just because I think we're a little bit over time.
Look, there's so much to add, but I think we don't have time. I think it's great that you're going to do another series or another part to this, because there's a lot of, I guess, different types of people who are struggling through this time that we might not necessarily have the time right now to go into how they can cope and how we can help them. So, you know, for example, single mothers who are struggling at home with special needs children, who don't have many, you know, support networks and things like that. People who have been traumatized previously, who are currently being re-triggered. You know, their trauma is being re-triggered as a result of, you know, the current situation we find ourselves in. But like you said, perhaps, you know, you can go into that in another time. But I guess I just wanted to say that, you know, everyone's experience is so unique and so different. So if you're listening and you felt like today, you know, you weren't really spoken to, and there's, you know, some questions that you have that were not really answered, then you can reach out to either myself or Mohamed Rima. I'm sure he'll be happy as well for you to reach out to him, and perhaps we can go from there.
So where can we find you, Sister Zena?
So I can be reached at Mindwise. You can search Mindwise on Facebook, or if you wanted to go to our website, it's at www.mindwise.org.au. And you'll find all the contact details there, as well as all the other amazing clinicians that I work with.
Fantastic. So, Brother Mohamed, can you give us some final thoughts and end with where we can find you as well, inshallah?
Yeah, I think I just wanted to add for domestic violence, if anyone is listening, that legal aid is still accepting calls for that, and they can still offer you guidance and help. Because I know a lot of lawyers are not seeing people face to face, and the courts are slowing the process down, but you still can access legal aid. Okay, that's what I wanted to add there. Final thoughts. I don't want to start because I can go. You know what I mean? Alhamdulillah. Just if you feel depressed, if you feel anxious, if you're battling any type of substance abuse, any type of addiction, reach out. You can reach out to me as well if you on a personal level. I'm on Facebook. You can find my page there, Mohamed Rima Counselling, or my website is www.mrcounselling.com.au. So mrcounselling.com.au, and just email me and I'll call you back. Don't feel shy. Break the stigma, and there's help there.
Alhamdulillah. Jazakallah khair, everyone. Thank you, Brother Mohammed and Sister Zena, for contributing to this program. Inshallah, we're going to have you again in the future as well. It doesn't look like this situation is going to end anytime soon. So there is a lot to discuss, even outside of this current context. I think there's a lot of important points that can be unpacked more specifically at another time. So a big thank you again to both of you for supporting this initiative. I urge any community members who are watching from any community to raise that awareness on these subjects. And mashallah, there's a lot of professionals, health professionals in this field in our own community that we can reach out to for their expertise. So may Allah will reward you for the work that you do. Keep you steadfast in the work that you do. You're in the front line, just like other medical professionals, and we hope to see you more and allow your practices and consulting services to thrive, inshallah. So Ameen to that dua, and I hope to see you guys soon as well. So I'll close it off at there, and take it easy. Yeah. Assalamu alaikum.